Hello everyone, so welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Douglas Johnson. I'm a yoga teacher, meditation teacher, spiritual counselor, ordained minister, and certified Kilobese inquiry facilitator. So if you're interested in topics relating to spirituality, meditation, inquiry, the journey inward, then you may want to subscribe. If you get something from this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you have any questions or you just want to say hello, please leave it in the comments below. And if you're interested in more content, yoga classes, events, things like that, be sure to check out my Patreon page. These days, that's kind of where my online community is most active, so I hope you'll check that out. And it does give you an opportunity, if you would like to donate and help support the work that I'm doing. It gives you an opportunity, a pretty easy way to do that. You can decide how much value you're getting from this content and contribute accordingly. Okay, so today I wanted to speak a little bit more about the missing manual to being human. Animals, they have instincts, and they are hardwired, kind of programmed, their nervous system's programmed to drive them toward doing the thing that's basically healthiest for them. So what studies have found is that animals that are kept in captivity, they're never healthier than animals that are in the wild. We think we're so smart, human beings, we create zoos, we feed animals certain things. Well, generally speaking, an animal, including your pet, it's never going to be healthier than if it were in a natural environment. Of course, this is a generalization. If you put an animal in a natural environment and there's a drought, then sure, it might starve to death, whatever. Particular situations. I'm not talking about a particular specific situation, right? So again, just need to understand what I'm saying, the intention of what I'm saying. Don't let your mind get, well, what about this? What about a drought? What about starvation? What if they get eaten by some other animal? Yeah, of course. Specifics will always be different, particular, okay? But in general, if we find a panda living in the wild, and we take a sampling of pandas living in the wild, and we take a sample of pandas living in the zoo, what we're gonna find is the pandas in the wild, in general, are healthier, okay? So we understand this when it comes to animals. Most of us will accept this without too much question. What we don't understand is we're animals. Human beings are animals. The big difference, if you will, is that we have an open-ended, programmable nervous system, if you will. And so that means that we can do things that are not good for us. And there won't be, it's not that animals can't, you can feed them things that aren't good for them, and they get hungry enough, they're going to eat it. Even things that are unnatural for them. But what I want you to understand is you're living in an environment where other human beings have actually been hired, scientists, right, have been hired, paid really good money to design things that really aren't necessarily food. They aren't necessarily natural or good for you in any way. But what they're able to do is, by adding certain flavors or certain chemicals, certain things, it tricks your biology into thinking that it's getting something that it's not. So your biology thinks it's being nourished, or it thinks that it's getting something really good or something valuable. And in reality, you're eating a bunch of junk. You're actually eating something that's maybe tearing you apart from the inside. So this is really relevant today because a lot of people struggle with obesity, diabetes, cancer, lots of other ailments and diseases that maybe aren't solely caused by diet, but diet is definitely contributing in a major way. And maybe it is even causing ultimately the ailment. That if the diet were corrected, that alone would, the ailment would not have happened, the cancer would not have happened, the whatever it is that wouldn't have happened. And I know that at one point I didn't understand this. I was just under the impression that, well, if something were really that bad, the government would do something about it. The FDA would do something about it. Some whistleblower would do something about it. I've learned that that's just simply not true, unfortunately. I'm not trying to, this isn't a conspiracy theory, I'm just stating facts here, okay? Unfortunately, our government has other things that are more important, that it deems more important to deal with, at least for the time being. Our government certainly doesn't have a track record. No government does necessarily, okay? So I'm not, again, this isn't some conspiracy theory about the American government, which is where I am, or any particular government or Western governments or anything like that. Just in general, government, human governments, big governments, national governments. Okay, these usually have their own priorities, their own agendas. Now, these might be tied up with big business, industry, GDP, getting reelected. There's all kinds of things. But in general, your personal health and well-being isn't at the top of the list there. I'm not saying it's not on the menu at all. I'm not saying that it isn't considered at all. But it's not a top priority. And I'll say it becomes even less so when there's a perception, not reality, but a perception that helping you to be healthier is going to interfere with a certain industry or business, okay? So again, if it's perceived that, hey, if we do this, it will be good for the health of people, but it's going to it's going to destroy this industry. I'm not saying that doesn't happen. It does, but usually it takes quite a while. There was a really interesting episode of Cosmos, the new version of it with Neil deGrasse Tyson. And in it, they talk about a gentleman who was trying to study something, and he was trying to eliminate the certain neurotoxin from the environment in his laboratory so that he could study a certain reaction, and the neurotoxin was interfering with it. Neurotoxin was lead, okay? So lead is a neurotoxin. It's not good for you. You don't want to ingest too much of it. You don't want to eat too much of it. You don't want to breathe too much of it. In fact, I don't think you really want to breathe or eat it at all. So lead, right? Okay. There was a time when gas companies were putting lead in the gas, okay? And then the cars were driving and the lead was coming out. Well, you would think it, might be pretty obvious. Don't put a neurotoxin into something that's going to end up in the air, and then we're all breathing it in. Well, that's exactly what they were doing. And, pretty the story is pretty much the same. Again, this is not a conspiracy theory. This is all documented fact that the gas companies hired lawyers to argue that, no, it's not a problem. They lobbied the government. It took a while for this scientist, and he had to do an uphill battle. Once he discovered this, that, hey, this lead in my laboratory is coming from the air. Why is there so much lead in the air? And then he realizes that, oh, it's these automobiles. So he had a quite inconvenient, he's a scientist, right? He just wants to do his job. He doesn't want to lobby the government. He doesn't want to spend a lot of time and energy on this. But he did, and he fought an uphill battle against other scientists who were hired by industry and paid to basically say or argue certain things, right? And eventually he won. And now if you go to the gas station, what are you going to find? Unleaded gasoline, right? But it wasn't always this way. This is what we need to remember. All right, so what did I want to talk about today? What's part of the missing manual of being human? Again, because we human beings have an open-ended nervous system, a malleable, a programmable nervous system, we can do things that are very bad for our health and not realize it. We're also omnivores by design. Okay, so we are designed to eat many different kinds of things and extract what we need nutritionally from these elements. But in nature, generally human beings had a pretty varied diet. And as city dwellers and modern people, we tend to have a less varied diet. You might think it would be the other way around, because you and I probably, in the cities that we live, especially if you're here like in a city like Atlanta, you have access to pretty much food from all around the world. And yet, surprisingly, you might find that there's a very limited number of ingredients that you're loading up on that are very unnatural to your biology. Your biology might be able to handle it, but it may not actually be good for your biology to be handling it, especially in the amounts, the frequency, and over a long period of time. A little every now and then, no problem. Okay, but for many of us, that's not what's happening here. Okay, so what are we talking about today? One thing, really, but it has many names, so you're going to have to educate yourself a little bit and know what to look for. This one thing is not going to be avoidable completely, but reducing it is going to be a really, really important thing for you to do. So what are we talking about? Quite simply, sugar, okay? And primarily two forms, but again, these two forms get hidden in your foods, especially in your health foods. They get hidden under different names. So things like agave nectar, I think coconut sugar crystals. There's all kinds of creative names. So I'll try putting a list in the description if you want to make a note of them. And if you're trying to follow my advice here, when you go to the grocery store, you're going to have to check pretty much everything that you buy to make sure these things are not added in high quantities. Like I said, a little bit is okay, but generally it's everywhere in our environment now. So we're talking about sugar and sucrose and fructose, okay? Especially high fructose corn syrup, but sucrose and fructose. These have increased in our diet exponentially over time, and we are just not designed to handle that. So in the things that you drink, especially if you like sodas, things like that. And I do have to mention here right away, because some of you might be thinking, oh, soda, well, I drink, you know, the diet version, so I don't have to listen to the rest of this talk. Sometimes the substitutes are worse than actually sucrose and fructose, or even high fructose corn syrup, which are very, very bad for you. So if the substitute is actually worse, then you really have to consider that. So it's not enough just to say, oh, I substitute out something else. Some of the substitutes are very, very bad as well, okay? Another thing I want to mention right here off the bat is that sometimes people think, well, okay, fructose is in fruit, so it can't be all that bad. Well, I hate to break it to you, too much fruit, also a problem, okay? If you have become vegan or vegetarian with the intention of losing weight, or you know, you're pre-diabetic and you're switching to that kind of a diet, you start eating a lot of fruits and vegetables, really, that term, we really need to change that. Not fruits and vegetables, vegetables. A lot of vegetables should be in your diet. A lot of vegetables. Whether you're a vegan, vegetarian, or a meat eater, it doesn't matter. A lot of vegetables. Not nearly as much fruit. I'm sorry, you're going to have to really be more selective in your fruit choices and the amount of fruit that you're deciding to consume. So I hope everyone understands. I am not saying don't eat fruits at all, but the amount. So I think you've all heard me say at some point or another that dosing is important. Okay, so a little bit of a certain kind of stress might not do anything for you. Then more might actually become a hermetic stress and become beneficial, and then more might actually become distress and become injurious. So the amount of something matters. The amount of fruit that you're eating matters. So again, we often hear, how do I eat more healthy, more fruits and vegetables? Yes, you're just kind of lumping fruits and vegetables together. Just because something is natural, it does not mean that you can't eat too much of it and affect your health in a negative way, okay? So put the emphasis on the vegetables, not so much fruits. Fruits should be treated a little bit like dessert, because again, while fruits have lots of good things in them for you, they also contain a lot of fructose, or they can. So one type of fruit that generally, and there's some variants here as well, but berries tend to be a very good choice because they tend to have less carbohydrates and sugars in them. So look into maybe eating more berries rather than some other types of fruits. Also sour fruits, as I understand, very often are going to be a better choice than the sweet type fruits. So fruits with a little bit of bitterness, sourness, so like a sour apple, a lemon, a lime, and again, berries are all very good choices if you're going to consume fruits. All right, so just because the food is all natural, just because it's a whole food, doesn't mean that it isn't going to harm us if we are not dosing properly, if we are consuming too much of it. Okay? Now the other part of it is, this doesn't mean, if you have a sweet tooth, doesn't mean you have to give up that flavor profile. There are two types of sugars that I'm aware of currently that are very good. From what I can tell, they're actually good for you. And at the least, they don't spike insulin, which is the big problem with sucrose, fructose, high fructose corn syrup, and even some of the alternative sweeteners, okay? So allulose, I think I'm saying that properly, allulose. Again, I'll try and leave the spelling down below or put it on the screen somewhere. This is a sugar that doesn't spike insulin. For me, it tastes just like table sugar. I drink it, I put it in my drinks sometimes. You can bake and cook with it as well. And the other is monk fruit. So I have a lot of chocolate that I eat that has monk fruit in it. And that's a great example. For instance, I think many people have heard that dark chocolate is supposed to be very good for you, but then you go out and buy dark chocolate and you're also getting sometimes a lot of sucrose or fructose, or again, these alternate names for things, agave nectar, agave sugars. There's a whole huge list. So you really got to be on the lookout for this, because you might say, oh, agave nectar, well, that's natural, I'm sure it's fine. Unfortunately, no. So allulose and, again, monk fruit. These are sweeteners that I'm aware of that do not drive up uric acid. They do not drive up insulin. And at least one thing I read alluded to that allulose might actually be good for you. So it may actually be doing things that are positive in your system, not just the kind of a net neutral, but actually positive. So again, the chocolates that I eat, the sweetener I put in my drinks, I can't really tell the difference. Maybe if I were to make a drink, the two of them right next to one another, maybe I would be able to tell the difference, but it doesn't have any kind of a saccharine aftertaste to me or anything that's super unpleasant. Now, do I still from time to time have something that I know has sucrose or fructose in it? Sure. Our bodies are designed to be able to handle a small amount of that. And again, this is how we know we're doing something very unnatural, because if our bodies were designed to eat as much as we were eating, then they wouldn't have a problem metabolizing it and dealing with it. So there's several books I've read that talk about why we have these problems. I don't want to get into that today. If you're interested, you can read those books. I've posted by some of the authors on the Patreon page videos by them. One of the books was again on uric acid and how important that is to keep that under control. In terms of just our overall health, all kinds of problems are tied with a rise in our uric acid. So if we generally want to keep a lot of these diseases at bay, then keeping our uric acid low as an indicator is a very good idea. So definitely sugar, fructose, high fructose corn syrup, these are going to drive that up. It's going to drive insulin up. So a question that may arise for you is, how did we get here? It's a gradual thing. They talk about if you try and drop a frog into a pot of boiling water, it will just jump right back out because it doesn't want to die. It doesn't want to get burned. But if you put the frog in the boiling water, in a cold pot of water or a cool pot of water, and then you turn the heat up, the frog will just sit there and it will get boiled alive. How does that happen? Because it acclimates to the heat and it doesn't sense the change, because the change is gradual. And so even though it has the ability to jump out of there at any time, and it actually is getting cooked alive, it just doesn't have the change is so gradual, it doesn't notice anything. Well, if you keep up with these things, what you'll notice is our modern times, we're dealing with so much disease and illness. It's unprecedented. Us modern people, cancers, going up and up and up. Fertility going down. Dementia, Alzheimer's going up. Depression, anxiety going up. Sleeplessness going up. Okay? I think I've shared this with many of you in the past. In a book I read, they mentioned that the requirements for entry into the US military since 1964 has been going down. The reason for this is that if they didn't lower the requirements for entry into the armed forces, we wouldn't have enough people. Okay, that's telling you something. That's telling you that your parents and your grandparents were likely more fit, healthier individuals than you are. Okay, so just across, again, this is a generalization, but generally it's true. So again, particular circumstances can be different. So you can't just look at your individual circumstance and say, oh no, my grandma, she was sick all the time. Sure, your grandma was sick. But in general, we find that that generation is going to be a hardier generation. They smoke and they drank and they weren't dropping like flies. They didn't have the levels of depression and dementia and cancer that we see today. This isn't just about better testing, folks. We're actually finding new problems are arising for us. This likely is related with epigenetic changes as well. So again, we've been living somewhat unnaturally for a long time, and we've been changing things very quickly since the Industrial Revolution. The way we process foods, the way we grow foods, the way we deliver foods, what we deliver those foods in. And all of these things are affecting us at one generation, and then those things are being passed on to the next generation. So there are several documentaries that you can watch if you're interested in digging into this. I know you're probably not that interested, unfortunately, but it's really quite fascinating. In the 70s, a few things happened. One is since World War II, the medical community was aware that more and more people were dying of heart disease, and that became a big issue. And so one gentleman came up with a theory that fat clogged arteries, just like fat clogs a drain. And we know now this individual was wrong, but it was a very appealing theory. It was an appealing idea. And basically there were, the sugar industry made sure that it was not implicated in this, because I think there was also a theory about sugar at that time. And I used to work at a restaurant. One of the chefs there said once that there's really only 3 ways to make food really taste good. And that's fat, it's sugar, and it's salt. So if you're around my age, you probably grew up or are familiar with low-fat diet, low salt consumption. These ideas, these were mantras that we grew up with. These were hallmarks. It was a given. If you wanted to live a long, healthy life, you had to be low-fat, right? If you had 3 pieces of bacon with your breakfast, you were just asking for trouble. In fact, some of the restaurants that I've dined at in the past, they would have, like a burger, and they would name it something like the cardiac arrest, right? And it wasn't full of sugar, it was full of fat. It would have an egg and bacon and beef, and basically the idea was you're clogging your arteries, you're asking for trouble. Now, I will say, you combine that with a soda or a milkshake or a lot of sugars, and you are asking for trouble. And that's part of the problem with the modern American diet, is we often do just that. We combine our proteins and fats with a sugary, syrupy, sweet drink full of fructose or sucrose or one of the other alternatives that are just as bad or worse. And then our arteries get clogged, whatnot. And we think, oh, well, it was the bacon, it was the burger, it was whatever. These things are not problematic in isolation. That's what the latest science is telling us. Eggs, bacon, fatty meats, nuts, things like that. These are not things that are going to clog our arteries if we consume them in, again, the right amounts and in the right ways, which again is frequency and what else are we consuming with it. So this theory, even though ultimately it was never proven, it was adopted by agencies. And so this mantra spread. And again, by the time I was coming up, this was pretty much common knowledge. You should eat a low-fat diet. Now, thankfully for me, I had a mother who was born in another country, and she was interestingly impervious to this message for the most part. What the food industry started doing is producing very unnatural foods that were created essentially in a factory, pieced together, where the fat was removed. But what was done, this was replaced with sugar, okay? Sweeteners, because again, people aren't going to eat something that tastes like cardboard. They just will not. And if you are in the food industry, it is your job to make money selling food. How can you make money selling food if no one's buying your food? Okay? So if you're left with, well, there's this message that fat and salt are bad, well, then I'll reduce the fat, I'll reduce the salt, and I'll keep sweetening it until it tastes good again, right? And this is what they did. Now, the food that they were producing may have had some nutritional value, it may not have. Again, it depends on the company, it depends on the brand, it depends on what exactly it is you're eating. But regardless of nutritional content, what you're getting was a load of sucrose, fructose, or high fructose corn syrup. Now, at the same time, in the 70s, there was a president who was worried about re-election, and the price of sugar was spiking. Sucrose, which was the main source of sweetening up to that time, it was spiking as it does from time to time. And what the president said is, I'm not going to lose this election because of the price of sugar. So he basically had, I don't know if it was the FDA or who, but he basically had part of the government go out and find a suitable replacement for sucrose, sugar. And what they came back with was high fructose corn syrup. This was invented by a Japanese scientist, food scientist. It was cheaper than sugar, it was sweeter than sugar, and guess what? It's made from corn. Iowa is where corn is grown. Iowa is also where the presidential primaries start in this country. So popular choice. You're going to sell more corn to sweeten everything, low fat. So we're just going to grow more corn, sell more corn around the world, right? Because this is, Coke goes all around the world. It's full of high fructose corn syrup. So again, these are not conspiracy theories, folks. I need to remind you, these are not theories. These are all facts. So the fact that, industry, the fact that a president is not interested in losing an election and finds an alternative to sucrose. I mean, again, you can look back and before the 70s, there's no fructose, there's no high fructose corn syrup. I mean, fructose is naturally in fruit, thus its name. but you didn't have it in other things, right? Unless it contained fruit. And there was no high fructose corn syrup, okay? So high fructose corn syrup, again, made in a factory. Your body does not know how to break that down. So again, if you had a choice between sucrose, fructose, and high fructose corn syrup, by all means, choose sugar or fructose. Do not choose high fructose corn syrup. This is the worst. But none of them are that great for you. They are all poisons. There's a great video that I will try and post on the Patreon page at some point, and it's called Sugar the Bitter Truth. And in that, he's I think a biochemist. And it's actually pretty dry and boring, so I don't imagine many of you will watch it. But if, again, you're sort of like, this guy's a yoga teacher, what does he know? I'm not going to listen to him about nutrition or diet or about the government. He doesn't know anything. Again, these aren't my opinions. These aren't things that I've drummed up out of nowhere. I'm interested in these things. I watch long, boring videos by biochemists. I listen to lectures. I watch documentaries, okay? Why? Because I'm interested in being healthy as long as I'm here, and I'm interested in sharing that with you. So again, this is not a popular idea that sugar is bad for me. I need to watch out for it. I need to cut it out. But if you can listen and you can actually implement this, then you're going to find that your health improves if you haven't already cut it out. Now, again, is it okay every now and then to have a popsicle? Yes, every now and then. Once a week, twice a week maybe, depending on your age, depending on your health, depending on your insulin levels and blood sugar and glucose, and are you doing intermittent fasting or not? How healthy is the rest of your diet? But like I said, you're going to get it in everything, folks. You're going to get it in things that you don't think you're getting it in. Protein bars, meat products, in bread that doesn't taste particularly sweet. You're just going to find that these ingredients have been added to almost everything. It's almost inescapable. So the way that I approach it, and the way you may want to think about approaching this, is try and cut your conscious consumption of sucrose and both forms of fructose to almost zero. Again, with the exception of some fruit, because some fruits, especially berries, lemons, and some citrus, have so much value for you, okay? But beware of dried fruits, folks. Dried fruit is usually not good for you. It's essentially candy. There may be exceptions to that, but the sources that I turn to, they basically rule out dried fruit. You're just not going to do it. Try frozen fruit instead, but dried fruit, see if you can eliminate that. So again, my approach is if I know something has sugar in it, unless I'm treating myself, and again, I treat myself rarely. That's what makes it a treat. If I'm treating myself every single day, it's not really such a treat anymore, right? And I know many of us grew up with this culture, this idea that I eat my dinner and I get a dessert, okay? This is not, unless again, dessert is really something healthy, like today, if I have a dessert, it might be berries, okay? Again, because I know that berries are going to be really high in things that are good for me and have a minimal amount of carbohydrates and sugars, amount that my body can fairly easily manage. If I'm talking about a treat or something like that, then I'm really talking about something like, I don't know, some bread when I go out to eat, or a piece of cake or something like that. Again, that's going to be a rare occurrence. That will be something that maybe once a week, if I'm really pushing it twice a week. But there will also then be probably many weeks where I do not partake in something like that at all. So again, for some of you, I imagine this will be a very foreign concept. It'll be it may seem alarmist, right? Because not everyone's screaming about this. But here's the deal, everybody, and I want you to think long and hard about this. When you go to the doctor, does she give you a clean bill of health? Does she tell you everything's in check? Are you free of arthritis and joint pain? Are you sleeping well? Is your energy good and consistent throughout the day? Are you free of things like brain fog, depression, anxiety, low energy, all these types of things, okay? If the answer is yeah, I'm in perfect glowing health, my doctor says I don't need to do anything, I'm not on any of these drugs, that my insurance company is paying for, I'm in good health, I feel great, I'm happy, well, good. Then keep on keeping on. And if eating 5 popsicles and a big stack of dried fruit and 12 sodas is a part of that program, then I have nothing to tell you. Seriously, I'm not being smart here. Really, if you have it figured out, then you can just skip this, okay? But what the science is pointing to, so that you're going to be a special case. So good for you, and you're a special case. Maybe you're just very young and you're not aware of the damage that's being done. That's also another possibility. When we're young, our body can be very resilient to the damage that we're doing. It doesn't mean it's not there, unfortunately. I wish it did, but sometimes we can get away with things when we're young and it catches up with us a little later. But chances are, if you're like an average American, then when you go to your doctor, there's some things that are not where they should be. And unfortunately, where we are right now, and I'm not blaming your doctor, and you shouldn't either, I'm not really blaming anyone or anything. It's just systemic. It just is where we are culturally in our general culture, and where science is, where the medical culture is. Generally, your doctor's not going to recommend a lifestyle change. And if they do, there's a good chance you wouldn't listen, unfortunately. So generally, doctors are discouraged from making recommendations on lifestyle, because one doctor I had a conversation with years and years and years ago said that, yeah, in med school, they told us don't bother making lifestyle recommendations because your patients won't do it. So just prescribe the meds, right? Prescribe the meds. It's a pretty bleak assessment of human nature, okay? My assessment and my approach is just the opposite. I'm hoping with enough education, enough inspiration, you can make the right choice, even if that choice is difficult. So sweets, sugars, I know it'll be tough. And here's the other part of it. These things are addictive, folks. So if, again, you are working in a food company and you know by adding sucrose and fructose to your food, you not only make it taste better, make it more palatable, you also are basically causing people to be addicted to it. That's going to be good for the bottom line, isn't it? It's going to make your company more money. In a sense, why wouldn't you? Right? Because you have a good conscience? right? Are you going to be able to explain that to your shareholders? Hey, shareholders, but I have a good conscience, right? And so I don't want to feel bad about myself. So I didn't make you that $18 billion we could have made if we had just tweaked the recipe to have more sugar in the food and made it more addictive. I wouldn't be able to sleep at night. So I chose not to do that. It's not really going to fly to the shareholders, is it? Now, unfortunately, this perspective is, again, a very bleak one that people bring to business. And again, they assume that people are, like sheep, and that people can be manipulated, and people are, once they get addicted to something, they're just going to blindly follow that. So my invitation to you is prove them wrong. Prove them wrong. Right? Do what's good for your health. And again, I don't care if your health is okay. It can be better, okay? Especially over the long term. Cutting out these sweeteners. And again, it doesn't mean you can't have anything sweet. But here's another aspect of it, folks. Once you get off the addictive cravings, which will take a little while, okay? And you can reach out to me if you need some advice with this and you need some counseling with this, because some of us are quite literally addicted to sweet things, okay? To sucrose and fructose. But once you're off of it, you're more sensitive to sweetness. So you might actually taste sweetness in your coffee without adding sweetener. You might taste sweetness in tea without adding sweetener. You might even taste sweetness in water, in some kinds of water. You might find that there's sweet flavors in all kinds of food. They're just subtle. They're not going to hit you over the head and knock you out like fructose and sucrose would. Basically, when you have a soda or some of these manufactured foods, a candy bar, there's no way you would be able to consume that amount of sucrose or fructose devoid of fiber. So again, you're actually doing something very unnatural. Is it natural for you to crave sweet things? Yes, to a degree it is. Again, that's a quick and easy source of energy, but in nature you would not have found that amount of it in abundance so easy, so free, right? And now because of modern techniques, we can. So this is what we have to remember. If you're like, well, if it's so bad for me, why am I craving it all the time? Why do I want to eat it all the time? Because in nature, you wouldn't have found that concentration of it, that amount of it. You wouldn't have had that much access to it. Even if you did one day, you came across a big, field of bananas or whatever it is, and you gorged yourself, right? The next day, the other animals, the other people in your tribe, whatever it is, would have eaten it up too. And so that abundance of food is now gone. And this again plays into another aspect that many of us don't know, which is we didn't evolve with agriculture. We evolved as hunter-gatherers. So again, the abundance of food, the amount of food that we have access to as modern people is unnatural. And that started with agriculture. But agriculture is a slog. It's hard physical labor. It's hard work. So you're also burning a lot of calories. So that's why some people refer to the modern diet, the 3 meals a day diet, all of this as a farmer's diet, okay? If you're going to be out in the field all day, working in the sun, hauling things, moving things with your physical body, then you may need to eat a lot of calories. You might need 3 big fat meals in order to fuel your body. But if you're going to sit at a computer all day, immobile, which is what most of us do these days, then you may not need 3 square meals, full meals, especially ones full of sugar, okay? So again, everyone, I'm not a nutritionist. In fact, I'm thinking of asking a nutritionist I know to share some information with the community here. And hopefully that'll be a video I do in a not too distant future. But in the meantime, this is another element of what is missing from our manual as human beings. So it's my hope, as always, my intention to share with you what I've learned, what may have been hard-won information. And this is what I call, you know, the missing manual. The things that if we had instincts as human beings, we would know, and it would kick in, and we would just stop eating the sugar and the fructose and all of that stuff. But what we modern people have is a situation where things are actually rigged in the opposite direction, where the food scientists, the food industry, these very smart people who've been hired to do these jobs, they basically are using our instincts against us, our cravings for sweets, our cravings for certain flavor profiles. They can actually engineer these in the lab. Again, these aren't evil people. They're people like you and I who've been hired to do a job, that's all. Okay? They've been hired to do a job, and they're doing that job. Is that job illegal? No. Okay? It's not illegal. But we haven't reached the point as human beings where we said, you know what, we don't need that. We're not going to have that. Okay? We just basically say, yeah, okay. If you want to engineer a food that is going to cause me to be addicted to it so you can make more money, even though it's going to cause me to have a heart attack, it's going to cause me to have diabetes, it's going to proliferate cancer in my body, oh, well, go ahead. So this is where we are. It's the Wild West, basically. These people and companies can do whatever they want, short of actually poisoning you, because they are poisoning you, essentially. But as long as there's not actual poison in there, it's going to make you drop dead right then and there. The food can essentially be almost as unhealthy as it wants. And it's up to you. So this is why I continually emphasize education. And that's why I try to educate. So again, if you're not already signed up for the Patreon, you can do so for $1. I think you can even do it for free. I'm not sure. If someone knows, leave me in the comment below. But $1 a month is essentially free, okay? Sign up, and I am sharing this information direct from the authors, scientists, nutritionists, biohackers that I'm learning it from. I try and find short, relevant videos that they produce, because a lot of them produce much better videos than I do. And I'm sharing 1 or 2 a week because, again, I am trying to educate myself and share that with you, because I think we all have the same intention. Is anyone really here to get sick? Is anyone really here to suffer? Does anyone really want that? On some level, unconsciously, we may have certain things that drive us in those directions, but this isn't ultimately what we come here to experience as human beings. We come here to experience the richness of human life and human emotion and human experience. Yes, there might be some pain involved. Yes, there might be sickness and heartbreak and disappointment and frustration, but there's also joy, there's also peace, there's also love, there's compassion. And when we're free, we experience all of this in a wonderful dance. And in the yoga tradition, that's called the dance of Shiva. And it's a play. It's a beautiful play. And everything is vibrating and fresh and new and just abundant, and life is seen as beautiful even when we are challenged, even when there's difficulty. And this is what we want to experience. And for me, I think it's very important. Education. Again, I can just tell you what to do and not to do. But I think that era of teaching is over. That's been my feeling for a long time. And I'm not that interested in that, honestly. I'm not interested in leading an army of robots or people who are just going to follow me around or listen to me blindly. So these videos are always intended to educate, to share. And like I said, if you're in perfect health and perfect happiness, I don't really have anything to teach you. Keep eating your sugar. Keep eating your fructose. Keep drinking your soda, your diet soda. Keep having ice cream after every meal. Eat your cake. Do whatever you like. There's nothing sinful or wrong in any of it. Again, it only becomes problematic when we find that it is impacting our health and happiness. And I think if you're doing those things, and again, you may think you're already moderate. And that's one of the things I really want to impress upon you in today's video, is you may be like, well, Doug, you know, I just enjoy a little bit of ice cream. I just enjoy my dessert. I would take a good hard look at that. Again, if you go to the doctor, now here's one of the things about doctors you have to understand, is as far as I'm concerned, and from what I can see, what is normal for your age, okay, especially if you're a slightly older, if you're in the sort of second half of your life like me, okay? Doesn't mean you're old. I'm not calling anyone old, but you're over 40, let's say, okay? A lot of what's considered normal by a modern doctor is already unhealthy. This was very apparent in the book on uric acid that I read, where he was saying what they consider normal levels of uric acid were too high. It was already causing health problems. Okay, can you understand that? Hopefully you can. Just because in this country or in the West or in most of the world today, it might be normal to eat X amount of sugar and have this level of inflammation, joint pain, arthritis showing up. Oh, it's normal for someone in your age. Don't take that information laying down. Because the studies we're doing, we're studying an already unnatural, unhealthy population. Okay? Don't assume that if they find a bunch of American 45-year-olds and say, oh, they all are pre-diabetic, so it's normal to be pre-diabetic when you're 45 in America. I'm making this up. Of course, that's not the case, but let's just say that doesn't mean it's normal for a human being. It doesn't mean it's healthy for a human being, okay? So please keep that in mind. When you go to your doctor and they say, oh, you have a normal level of this, I'm going to prescribe this drug and bring your this and that into line with whatever. Be careful, okay? Be careful. Don't take that laying down. You want to maintain your health as youthful as you can for as long as you can. Ideally, you want to go to the doctor and you want to be above or below the average, depending on what it is. You want to be above average in health. You want to be below average in indicators of disease, aging, and wear. And if you're not, my advice to you is investigate. Begin to look into non-pharmacological and non-invasive, non-surgical remedies. They're out there. Explore those, maybe in tandem with your doctor, with other things, if it's an acute situation. But if it's not acute, then see if you can get those numbers to change, right? If your doctor isn't like, oh, this is an emergency, we need to get this way down quickly, like you're in danger. If they're like, well, this is starting to creep up a little bit, see what you can do. And one of the things that you can do across the board for your health, everyone, which is why I'm doing this talk today, is cut out sucrose and fructose in all their forms. And again, I will try and list all the names if they show up. If you can cut those out, and again, you do not need to be militant. So if it's your birthday and someone bakes you a cake and you haven't had a cake in 7 months, enjoy the cake. Don't freak out about it. Don't refuse it because you're cutting sugar out. You're at a fancy dinner and someone tells you there's an amazing dessert there. Enjoy your life. Don't be too militant about any of this, but be disciplined at the same time. And regularly try and cut these things out as much as you can consciously. Because again, you go to Panera Bread and you order a piece of bread with your soup. Both in the soup and in the bread, probably these things have been added without you knowing it. Okay? It's going to be everywhere. It's in barbecue, it's in meats and seasoning, it's in salad dressing. It's all over the place, everybody. So it's almost inescapable. So if you can consciously reduce the amount that you're aware of to zero or almost zero with an occasional exception, then you will do a lot to moving yourself forward. If you want a quick suggestion, if you're someone who's this applies to and you're kind of, well, where should I start? Start with the drinks. Just cut out the sugary drinks. No more colas, no more sodas, even cocktails that have all kinds of syrup and sweet, just cut those out completely. Start there. Start there. Start drinking tea instead. See if you can find some herbal teas that you like. Some of them can be quite sweet. And again, there are natural sweeteners, allulose, monk fruit, that you can use. And so you can create an iced tea. You might even be able to make a carbonated drink at home from these. Some of these are sold at the store. But again, these are the only two sweeteners that I'm aware of that won't spike your uric acid and your insulin. And as far as I'm aware of right now, those are the two things that you really need to look out for. So I'm not, as far as I know, stevia, I know that's really popular, but as far as I know, that may create some problems with uric acid because it wasn't on the approved list that he gave in his book. And that's a great book, worth checking out if you haven't, by the way. All right, everyone, if you're still here, thank you for listening. Again, if you'd like to help support the community and myself, check out Patreon. There's extra content there, more information. You can get in touch with me very easily on that platform. Please reach out if there's any way that you think I can be of assistance to you. This is what I do for my living, and this is a passion of mine. So helping people in this way, in this fashion. If you have any questions, let me know. And I'll hope to see you again soon. Until then, namaste and have a beautiful day.